You're watching LMCC.
Welcome to Westonka Memories. My name is Pam Myers, and I volunteer with the Westonka Historical Society. Today I'm interviewing Shirley and Vern Andersen, former business owners in our area. So tell us about what business you had in our area.
I started out in the grocery business, in the meat business, and then my brother was the one that got me into the jewelry business.
And when did your jewelry business come to our neighborhood?
Well, I was an apprentice in Minneapolis for about 25 years before I opened up the store in Mound. So when I opened up the store in Mound, it was about 1969. Mm-hmm. And it was my wife who got me started in the business. I actually would rather work for somebody than to be my own boss. I'd rather have somebody tell me what to do.
And then you got your wife, and then you got somebody to do that.
Yes.
So tell me, when did Shirley come into the picture?
Shirley came in, she started working, well, she had a child left in school yet. So she didn't start working full-time until after. But then I kept working in Minneapolis until we got going out in our store. When I went to the bank to get the money back in those days, back in the early days, they said the jewelry business was not a good place to loan money. So we started out with nothing. And we borrowed a counter. So we only had one little counter, and then we went to Minneapolis, and when we went to buy stuff, they laughed at us because we ordered one of this and one of that, and 5 watch bands, and they thought, oh boy, this is going to be some jewelry store. But that's how we got started.
Mm-hmm. Tell me again, help me with the location, because I don't know yet.
It would be kitty corner from the Catholic Church.
Huh.
It was the old Finley building. They called it the Finley building because it was a car dealership back in the old days. And it burnt down, and then they remodeled it, and then they sold it to
Phil Lansing.
Phil Lansing.
And Johnson.
And
Johnson, they owned the building.
Was it adjacent to the Long Prix building?
No.
It
was way down.
It was way down the block.
Long Prix was on the corner.
Where the old Catholic Church stood.
Sure.
Then they had the rectory next to it, and then our building was right there.
I see.
And that building is gone now.
So what did you like most about that job, being a jewelry store owner?
I think the most I liked about that business was this is a challenging business. You have to be on your toes, and back in the old days, we did everything by hand. We didn't have none of this fancy casting or none of this stuff. We took a piece of gold and bent it round, and we started there and we dug the flowers in. If it had flowers or whatever design was in, we put that in by hand. And when we used to work on a ring, the boss used to come up to us and say, I know who worked on this ring because each guy had his own little method of doing things.
I'll bet.
And that's how I got started. And I was an apprentice for 5 years before I even started working in the jewelry business, that they let me touch stuff or do things.
So Shirley, what part did you play in this business once it was started out here?
Well, I ran it alone for 1 year. I didn't know a diamond from a piece of glass. But I managed, and then it got to the point where more and more people were coming. Back in those days, there was more businesses and less people, and now it's the opposite.
I was going to ask you about changes in the community. That certainly is one, that there were more businesses than people.
Many, many, many changes, not for the good. Not for the good.
Vern mentioned that Findlay had an auto dealership. What other stores do you remember that were
Right
in
across
downtown?
the street from us, right across the street from the Findlay building, we had a Sears store.
Roebuck.
We had a Nelson shoe store. We had a Ben Franklin at one time. Was started down there. That was started by Joe Gibson, not Joe, Dick Gibson. That's his brother. He had the dime store down there. That was all before they moved it down. And our main street was the main street of Mound. The street, the 15 was called the main street. That's because all the businesses were on Main Street.
Didn't we have parking? We had parking
On street parking.
on street, which was terrible when they took it off. That was a downfall.
So and at one point you moved from one location to the other,
Yes.
to a second location, is that right?
Right.
Well, that's when they decided they were going to eventually tear down the building, the Findlay building. So they asked us if we wanted to move down into the new shopping center, and of course that was a big thing for us. That was a bigger store and more space, and it was a big challenge.
I think Dr. Romness and Carlson were kind of edging us on a little bit too. They wanted us down there. And then, let's see, who was next door at the time? Was that Byron Peterson?
No, that was, I can't remember the name of the optometrist that was next door to us at that time.
Yeah.
And then across the way was the clothing store, that women's clothing store. And,
Christopher Banks.
Christopher Banks.
And then the beauty shop.
The drugstore was down at the end, and the doctors had their offices up
Next door.
next door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a busy place, wasn't it?
It was
Oh,
all
it was a
full
very
all
busy-
those years. And
It
then
was a
when
very
Christopher
busy
Banks left, then that started it all. And then the drugstore went across the street.
So how many years did you have that? Were you in business in Mound?
48 and a half.
48 and a half. And from when to when?
From 69 for about, let's see, we were in the Commerce Place about 35 years. So what's between 35 and 48 and a half was down next to the old church.
Yeah.
Tell me about one of your happiest memories of being in the store. So Vern, we'll start with you.
Well, the happiest moments was just being in business in Mound at that time, because meeting people every day, and that was a big thing, and it was a wonderful thing because people were so nice to us, and Mound was just and our businessmen used to meet. We had a chamber of commerce at that time, and we used to meet about once a month, and we'd talk about things that we were planning on doing and it was a very happy moment.
Super, that's wonderful. Shirley, tell us about one of your happiest memories.
Well, I think one of the things, Vern Gagne brought a lot of the wrestlers in there, which was kind of nice, and they were such nice people. And I guess the main thing is when he would make rings, and they would come in and pick them up, and then some of the ladies would cry.
Oh.
They were so happy. That's the biggest joy of all.
For sure, that's delightful.
Yeah.
Your work life probably taught you some lessons, Vern. What did you learn in your work life?
Well, one of the things, I think the most important thing that I learned in our business is the jewelry business is honesty. Everything you did you had to be honest. So I think that's what it taught me, to do business and do everything that to the best of my ability.
Terrific. So were there people in the community who were influential for you or for your business?
Yes, there was a long priest was and Bill Nitka's both were very influential in helping us get started, and they were very up and up in the business world at that time. Jerry Longpree and Bill Nitka were the big people in the Chamber of Commerce at that time.
Sure.
And I remember those guys the most.
So what are a couple of things that you're most proud of from your business? We'll start with Vern.
I think the most thing that I'm proud of is the things that we accomplished, and we were in business for such a long time. Those are the two things I think are the most important things for me.
Mm-hmm. And Shirley, what would you say are some of the things you're most proud of?
Well, one thing is all the help we ever had in the whole 48 and a half years, they were all very honest people that worked for us. So, and in our business, you had to be. So that was a big thing. And even now, when I'm in the grocery store or the drugstore or anywhere in Mound, I see all the people that and it's really a wonderful thing.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Now, I also understand that you had family worked in your store.
Oh, everyone.
So tell us about the family.
Well, we had Sharon, Paul, Linda, Jeff, and David, and they all took their turn. And then in the end, it was Jeff and Vern and I. And one of the big reasons was I was getting kind of old.
No.
And yes.
No.
And then Jeffrey had some medical problems, and he had kind of like a palsy in his hand, and he just couldn't do the job anymore. So we just decided this is the time. But it was hard, very hard.
I'm sure that's true. Now, I know, Vern, that you were active in the community in addition to Chamber. I've seen a picture of you in the fire department.
Yes, I put 20 years in the Mound Fire Department, and my dad was one of the original starters of the fire department.
And then
on
your
the
uncle.
regiment. Yeah, my uncle
And his
was.
uncle.
Well, back in those days, it was mostly all relatives in downtown. You couldn't get in trouble, because if you did, they told your mom and dad right away.
For sure, I bet that's true.
Well, Bernie Winkle was chief, and that was his uncle, and he was tougher on him than anybody, because he was the uncle.
Oh my.
Yeah.
So were there, you probably have fire department memories too.
Well, I think the biggest thing about the fire department was companionship. We were like a big family, and that's what I think I remember the most.
So when you first were a fireman in the Mound area, I know from driving around town that there are what they call fire roads. So were you getting water from the lake?
We started
years?
pumping when I first joined the fire department, we were pumping from the lake. That's why they had fire lanes all over town, so that the fire department and we used to drive the truck to the lake. But we had trouble with our pumps, with the sand getting into the pumps. And it cost us so much money to take care of that we didn't want no more pumps. I mean, pumping from the lake.
Sure. And
that's why we don't pump from the lake.
When was that? What year? When did you start with the fire department?
I started in 1955 and I retired in 75. Put 20 years in. And when I first joined the fire department, we had the siren and we had the tin shed. We called it the tin shed. We didn't have no fire station like they have now.
Sure. So, Shirley, I have a memory of a story that I've heard you tell as well that has to go back to your wedding. wasn't there a wedding?
Oh, that was Mrs. Utman's
Yes,
tea room, and he
there
was
you
a
go.
lawyer. And one of the things was when we were newly married, you don't have any money, and he would take the bus, and we would take the bus to Minneapolis. I worked at Northwestern National Life Insurance, and then he went down to Hennepin Avenue there, and we were getting off the bus, and he put a $10 bill in Vern's hand. That was big time, big time. But on the porch that's still there now, in my wedding book, she did a beautiful job. She took the wedding cake and put it in the middle, and it was the whole family and grandmas and a fellow that he went to Nazareth Hall with. He was invited, and they did a beautiful job. And then the reception was where the ice cream place is, across from the bank. That alley there was the old American Legion.
Ah,
And that's where we had our wedding dance and reception.
wonderful. Wonderful memories.
Oh, it is, it is.
So was there something else about the jewelry store and the history, the memories that you'd like to share with us that you thought would come up today and we haven't said yet?
The only thing I think about the jewelry business is in the old days, we made everything by hand. Everything was made by hand. The tools, the boss said, if you want a tool, you make it. And they showed us how that we used to have to heat it with a torch and bend it and everything. But we made everything that we did back in those days by hand. In fact, our first cleaning, steam cleaner, was an old pressure cooker.
Really?
We just took an old pressure cooker and put a piece of copper over the top, and that was our
And it would jiggle.
steam cleaning. Yeah.
So Shirley, I wonder if you have memories that you thought we'd talk about today and we haven't talked about yet.
Well, I don't know. I just enjoyed it for all those years. And if I would have been younger, I would have just stayed right there.
Sure. Well, it certainly was the go-to place in town. I didn't come to town until 1980, but if anything that I needed that had to do with jewelry, people would say to me, "Go to V&S," and they were right.
And we did a lot of things for people free. And I don't know where you can go today to get anything like
Well, for
hooking up chains and that. You can't charge for that, you know. So we had a lot, and we met an awful lot of people.
For sure.
Yeah. So,
Well, and you did plaques for us for awards.
well, we had a big trophy business also. Yeah. And Jeff still has all the machines and all the stuff,
Wow.
but it's just too hard for him to do.
Sure. Well, it certainly was fun to talk with you today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having us.
For sure.
Yeah, thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
having us.
I've been working on him to, and my daughter says, get a tape recorder whenever he starts talking, you know, because a lot of people, like, say, for instance, the 3 points,
Sure.
most people that live there don't know what that stands for. Do you know what it stands for?
I assumed it was the geography, that there are
It
3
was
points of land.
Woodland, now I forget, Shadywood, and what was the other one? Dreamwood.
Woodland.
And most people don't, when they come in the store, I would ask them, they didn't know what it was. But that's what it was, because I lived out in 3 points.
Ah,
Yeah.
I
Crazy.
quartered her out. And
Yeah.
did you?
Well, when I was going out for cheerleading, I didn't know him, and he said, I'm going to marry that girl.
Oh, dear. So where did you go to high school?
I went to South High, 9th and 10th grade, and then my mother and dad rooted me out to Mound, cried all the way.
And why did they do that?
I don't know why they left that house. It was down by Fairview and St. Mary's Hospital, Riverside Park. And then I went to Mound for the last 2 years,
And you were graduating class of
48.
48?
He was 47. Yep. Then we were married in 49. So it goes back a long ways.
For sure it does.
Yeah. And we have the 5 children, 14 grand, 22 great,
Oh my goodness,
and one on the way in January.
terrific.
Yeah. So it's a
Terrific.
big family.
For sure.
And this year, we haven't even been able to get together.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But the
So-
vaccine is coming.
I hope so. It's coming very slow.
It does feel very
Yeah,
slow.
it does. Yep.
So Vern, were there other things besides the fire department that you participated in?
Well,
everything.
I used to do a lot of work for the church back in those days.
Would that be Our Lady?
Our Lady.
Yeah, Our Lady of the Lake. Yeah,
Knights of Columbus.
yeah.
You coached.
I was a cub master for quite a few years, and I was a CPA, Catholic Parents Association. I was president of that, and I did a lot of. We used to clean the church, the big church, the one that's on Main Street now. We used to do that, scrub that by hand.
Oh my.
About 5 of us guys. And we used to do that every Monday morning. And my grandmother attended the first Mass in Mound.
Oh my.
Yeah. And in the old days, we didn't say, Mound was kind of like a summer community. The people just went out there for the summer for the lake. So the church didn't want to heat the church up, so they had Mass down in the basement of the rectory.
Sure.
I mean, of the priest's home. He had it down in his basement. And I remember I was an altar boy. And I was an altar boy for the first priest in Mound, that was Father Yeager. And I was one of his altar boys back in those days.
That's terrific. You have a lot of history in your head,
Yeah.
Vern.
He does.
Thank you, Shirley, for bringing him along.
Well, I thought maybe, I wasn't sure when we first lined it up. And so I kept saying now, you know, because he's got to get it out because there isn't many really older people in that remember all this
For
stuff.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for doing that. Thank you again, Vern, for coming.
You're welcome.
Oh, I appreciate it.
In fact, I took all my kids on the last train in Mound where the trail is now, down to Minneapolis.
Did you?
That's a long time ago, yeah.
It's a long time
And
ago.
he
it's true.
fought desperately to keep the building down where the bank is now, and it's down at the Mound Bay Park.
That was the train depot.
He wanted to keep that there so bad, like they did in Wayzata, and they wouldn't. He just couldn't get it through.
Yeah.
That would have been wonderful because we could have had Santa Claus there. We could have had all the meetings there and everything.
Sure.
But
Yep, it's hard.
time goes on.
Time goes on. Yep. Well, thank you again.